If you don't remember anything dark happening in Full House, you're probably suppressing the horror of everything that could go wrong in the terrifying world of 90s TV shows. Death, disease, and sci-fi satanic visits were the least of your worries in 1990s primetime. In each episode of Quantum Leap, Dr. Sam Beckett jumped into a different person's body at different points in history,
striving to put right what once went wrong.
Once the historical catastrophe was averted, he'd leap to someone else, say his famous "oh boy" catchphrase, and begin the next adventure.
Oh boy!
Along the way, he was aided by his best friend Al, a hologram from the future. Due to its time travel format, Quantum Leap jumped freely between many genres. In one haunted house episode, Sam leaps into the body of a horror novelist. While he's usually there to save lives, he's unable to prevent people from dying all around him. But then it's also revealed that Sam's holographic buddy Al has been possessed by the devil, who then tries to murder Sam. It gets intense, but don't worry, because it's Quantum Leap, things turn out okay in the end. The show even throws in a fun Stephen King reference.
Stevie King.
Hey, Cujo!
The heart of Roseanne was always the working-class relationship between the title character and her husband Dan. That is, until the final season, where a surprise lottery win turns the family into millionaires, leading to bizarre wealthy celebrity hijinks. The series finale hits viewers with the biggest plot twist of the series. The whole last season was a novel written by Roseanne, who never won the lottery at all. Apparently, Roseanne's fiction writing habit is her way of coping with the loss of Dan, who had actually died of a heart attack in the previous season.
My writing's really what got me through the last year after Dan died.
In about 2 minutes, the entire run of the show goes from comedy to tragedy. For what it's worth, the 2018 Roseanne revival showed Dan to still be alive. Of course, then Roseanne herself was written off the show due to her own questionable comments. That's a different kind of dark. From start to finish, Seinfeld was snarky and witty and treated every situation like a joke. However, in one episode from 1992, the show got a little too real for comfort. The opera is all about Crazy Joe Davola, who'd seem more at home in Silence of the Lambs than Monk's Cafe. The insanity starts when Crazy Joe phones up Jerry, leaving a message where he threatens him.
Now I'm gonna put the kibosh on you.
Crazy Joe has also been stalking Elaine, plastering countless photographs of her face across his apartment walls. From there, he spends the rest of the episode acting like a genuine serial killer, finally disguising himself in a clown costume and scaring Kramer. The laugh track only makes the whole thing even more disturbing. The worst part? At the end of the episode, Crazy Joe is still at large. Frasier, one of the most low-key sitcoms of all time, found fancy and erudite Frasier Crane living in quiet, rainy Seattle, working as a psychiatrist on a radio call-in show, and hanging out in a coffee shop with his even fussier brother Niles. Frasier may have been middle-aged, divorced, balding, and self-absorbed, but none of that was going to stop him from trying to bed as many beautiful and intelligent women as possible. In the 1994 episode Slow Tango in South Seattle, an old psychiatric patient played by John O'Hurley, who Frasier helped to conquer writer's block, has apparently lifted the story of Frasier losing his virginity and turned it into a best-selling work of romantic fiction. At first enraged by this violation of privacy, Frasier instead sets out to track down his first partner and thank her for making a man out of him. It turns out the woman was his 40-year-old piano teacher, and she seduced Frasier when he was 18.
I wasn't interested in 40-year-old men then, and I guess I'm still not.
Friends is a TV show that purported to depict the life of single 20-somethings in, well, a group of friends. But it was a pretty weird show during its first season. For example, Ross had a pet monkey, which is not a normal thing people did in the go-go 90s. Also, there's that episode where Monica deflowers a minor. At least producers knew they were getting weird. They titled it The One with the Ick Factor, after all. Monica, years from finding true love with Chandler, dates a younger guy named Ethan. He's a senior in what Monica thinks is college, and so she lies too.
It's not even an issue, because I told him I was 22.
She's actually 26. They soon physically consummate their relationship, and after the deed is done, Monica tells Ethan her real age. That's when he admits he told a lie too. He's a senior in high school, and also he's 17. That's a deal breaker for Monica, who somehow avoids prison. The Golden Girls is a cult classic about Miami housemates Dorothy, Rose, Sophia, and Blanche, who dated, dealt with the perils of aging, sass-mouthed each other, and ate a cheesecake in the middle of the night. The show also delivered an episode about the AIDS crisis. The 1990 installment 72 Hours found Rose, played by Betty White, grappling with the news that the blood transfusion she'd received during a surgery years prior may have been tainted with HIV. She gets tested and has to wait 72 frightening hours for the result. Rose endures mental and emotional anguish throughout, and at one point declares that she's a good person and doesn't deserve to get AIDS. Blanche thoughtfully replies,
AIDS is not a bad person's disease, Rose. It is not God punishing people for their sins.
Powerful statement made. And of course, Rose didn't get AIDS after all. It was a comedy show. The 1990 Full House episode Shape Up nobly demonstrates eating disorder warning signs to parents of teens and tweens, framed around DJ Tanner's invitation to her best friend Kimmy Gibbler's pool party. Realizing she'll have to wear a swimsuit in public, DJ feels some toxic body shame and becomes obsessed with losing weight as quickly as possible. She posts photos of rail-thin models on the fridge to discourage herself from eating, eats ice on a stick, feeds her sandwich to the dog, and then stops eating altogether. The family realizes she has a serious problem when she collapses after working out too hard on a treadmill. Rather than seek treatment for DJ's eating disorder, Dad Danny Tanner talks to her.
That how a person looks on the outside isn't nearly as important as who they are on the inside.
Because things had to wrap up in 30 minutes, she's immediately cured and announces her intention to attend the pool party and just have fun. Problem solved? The 1995 movie Clueless was so popular with 90s teens that ABC and later UPN adapted it into a TV series. Stacey Dash, Elisa Donovan, and Donald Faison reprised roles from the movie, while Rachel Blanchard took over for Alicia Silverstone as Cher Horowitz. The movie was based on Jane Austen's Emma, so the show ran out of source material pretty quickly, but a very special episode in 1999 tackled the perils of drunk driving. Cher's friends throw her a huge 18th birthday party. It's so 90s that NSYNC even shows up. Cher, Marie, Sean, and Cher's boyfriend of the moment, Adam, party hard and get drunk. Everyone but Cher tries to drive home.
Look, Cher, there's been an accident.
While Murray walks away, Sean and Adam get hospitalized, and a short time later, Adam dies from undiagnosed internal injuries. That sure doesn't happen in Emma. Before it became a soap opera about young, sun-kissed Californians, Beverly Hills 90210 was about goofy high school kids who happened to have excellent haircuts and designer clothes. One plot thread involved cool and popular David Silver still hanging around with his sort of nerdy pal, Scott Scanlon. During season 2, Douglas Emerson, who played Scott, wanted to leave the show, so the writers wrote him out in a very big way. Scott's mom asks David and Donna to plan Scott's big 16th birthday party, and they throw a big bash. But Scott, ever the misfit, sneaks away and rummages through a desk drawer where he finds a gun. He plays around with it, and shockingly, accidentally shoots himself dead on his birthday. The boy of Boy Meets World is Corey Matthews, a Philadelphia tween who learns something new about the world each episode. The sitcom series tracked the development of Corey's relationship with Topanga, from classmate to crush to girlfriend to wife. But it's really a series about the bromance between Corey and his ride-or-die best pal, Sean. In one episode, Sean gets mixed up with The Center, a live-in church led by the charismatic Mr. Mack, where adherents spout creepy platitudes like,
"That a hug is a burst of pure love."
Sean gets hopelessly brainwashed into the Center's way. Before long, Corey is struggling to find a way to deprogram his best friend, but the universe takes care of things. After Sean's favorite teacher gets into a gruesome motorcycle accident, he snaps out of it. Perhaps the most shocking thing in this 1996 episode of Home Improvement is that bumbling dad Tim the Toolman Taylor has to stop grunting like a caveman and act like a sensitive, modern man for a hot minute. In The Longest Day, Tim's son Randy goes in for a routine medical checkup. The doctor's office calls and tells Randy's parents that there's a possibility their boy may have potentially fatal thyroid cancer.
You know, if I didn't know better, I think I was dying.
The family has to wait for test results to come in while the two frightened parents contemplate the death of their child, and Randy worries that he's going to die. Everything turns out fine, of course, but The Longest Day feels like the longest Home Improvement episode. Saved by the Bell exists in a bizarro version of the 90s where teens experienced zero repercussions for constantly scamming their principal, who is also their best friend. Bayside High was a strange place to be sure, but it was nearly torn asunder by the cold claw of addiction in the November 1990 episode Jessie's Song. Overachiever Jessie bites off more than she can chew, trying to balance her high level of commitment to school and singing in Hot Sunday, the cover group she's formed with Kelly and Lisa. There aren't enough hours in the day, so Jessie turns to caffeine pills for energy. In a terrifying TV moment, she experiences a panic attack and scream sings, "I'm so excited."
I'm so excited! I'm so excited! I'm so scared!
A caffeine binge would result in agitation and a headache, not a full-on freakout, but it's all because standards and practices wouldn't allow what the writers had originally plotted, an addiction to speed. Still, the show does make a point about how kids like Jessie can easily burn out trying to meet high expectations. In the 1990s, music videos became not just big-budget works of art, but also vital parts of musicians' marketing campaigns. Some of them starred beautiful women who became cultural icons. Here's a look at what those video vixens have gotten up to since then. Bobbi Brown, who spells her first name with an I-E at the end, is not to be confused with makeup tycoon Bobby with an I Brown, or New Edition singer Bobby with a Y Brown. This Bobbi Brown is actually one of the most recognizable music video stars of all time. Hair metal videos often featured scantily clad women, and Warren's Cherry Pie is one of the classics. It stars Brown wandering around a white space in a red halter top, sucking on cherries and dropping slices of cherry pie in her lap. And wouldn't you know it, she ended up marrying Warrant lead singer Janie Lane in 1991, although they then divorced in 1993. After some more music video appearances, Brown segued into acting, often typecast as a blonde bombshell in small parts in things like Married with Children and Last Action Hero. In 2013, she joined the reality circuit as a part of the Canadian series Ex-Wives of Rock. That same year, she published her memoir, Dirty Rocker Boys, in which she detailed her recovery from drug addictions as well as her ongoing battle with the compulsion to pull out her own hair. Alicia Silverstone appeared in a trilogy of 3 massively popular Aerosmith videos in the early 90s. She wasn't a dancing around and pouting video vixen, rather, she was a real actress, and she proved it in these clips. Cryin' features her dealing with a nasty breakup and finding peace. In Amazing, she plays a virtual reality dream girl, and in Crazy, she flees private school to have some wild adventures.
Was that weird to do, all the kissing and...
Yeah, you just do it.
Those videos all received heavy rotation on MTV, launching Silverstone to a legitimate acting career. In 1995, she starred in the thriller Hideaway as well as the cultural touchstone Clueless. That year was followed by plenty of other roles and a career that's still going strong. In addition to her work in film and TV, she's also a vocal supporter of animal rights and an advocate of the vegan lifestyle. The phenomenal success of the 1987 album Appetite for Destruction gave Guns N' Roses a blank check creatively and financially. So they went ahead and released not one, but 2 albums in 1991, Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. To promote these 2 albums, the band made a series of expensive, symbolism-heavy cinematic videos connected by a loose narrative theme of love and loss. In Don't Cry, model Stephanie Seymour and singer Axl Rose brutally fight over a gun while Seymour wears a tight tank top. And in November Rain, Seymour marries Rose while wearing a skimpy wedding dress and then tragically dies. Seymour also dated Rose from 1991 to 1993, a relationship which descended into domestic violence allegations and lawsuits.
That's really a drag.
As one of the original supermodels of the early 90s, Seymour used that goodwill to be the face of various campaigns well into the 2000s. More recently, she launched Raven and Sparrow, a high-end lingerie line. Back in the late 70s, Meatloaf had his big moment with his mixture of hard rock and deep-throated show tunes on his massively successful album Bat Out of Hell, which was certified 14 times platinum. After a cool period in the 80s, he returned with the smash hit Bat Out of Hell 2, Back into Hell in 1993. The lead single, I'd Do Anything for Love But I Won't Do That, went all the way to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. It's partially a duet with session singer Lorraine Crosby, providing the female vocals. The woman who appears in the epic video, however, is not Crosby, but a model named Dana Patrick who lip-synced to Crosby's vocals while she ran around a castle and hung out on a magically floating bed. This was the first time Patrick appeared on screen. She was cast on the strength of an audition tape she made for a Levi's commercial that wound up in the hands of the video's director, none other than Michael Bay. After her big break, Patrick starred in another Meatloaf video, I'd Lie for You and That's the Truth, and scored bit parts on a few TV shows including Seinfeld.
Annabelle, Justina, and Nikki. We used to model.
Oh, modeling! What's that like, fun?
Patrick is now retired from acting and runs her own Los Angeles-based photography business specializing in portraiture. Blink-182 is a punk rock band, and what's more punk rock than a unified marketing message? In 1999, the trio released the album Enema of the State, whose cover featured a woman dressed as a smoking hot nurse. That same woman also played a nurse walking down the street in the video for What's My Age Again. That's the one where the band members do various public activities without any clothes, which is ironic because that clothed model they encounter, Janine Lindemulder, earned her living in the buff as the star of dozens of adult films in the 1990s. Around the time of What's My Age Again, Lindemulder walked away from the world of adult entertainment to raise her kid and work as a kindergarten teacher. A few years later, however, she was back in the adult industry. She also made headlines for some personal issues. In 2002, she married motorcycle customizer Jesse James, and a year later she wound up in prison for assaulting him. They divorced in 2004 and then got into a custody battle over their daughter.
Did Woodstock 99 herald the death of music? Or maybe it was 1998, when mainstream originality was auto-tuned into oblivion. Either way, the 1990s was bad times for good music. Avid concert goers have found their hobby getting more and more expensive for decades, and the trend toward more pricey concert tickets began in earnest in the early 90s. According to the Los Angeles Times, it was then that the country's biggest ticket seller, Ticketmaster, acquired its biggest competitor, Ticketron, which enabled it to ramp up a practice that music fans already weren't too keen on, charging hidden service fees that, depending on the ticket price set by the venues, could increase the cost of a ticket by 50% or more. Fortunately for the fans, the Justice Department, concerned about Ticketmaster's all but cornering of the market, approached the biggest rock band on the planet at the time, Pearl Jam, about a possible counteroffensive. In 1994, at the DOJ's urging, Pearl Jam cut ties with the ticket giant, filed a formal complaint with the DOJ, and mounted their own tour, demanding that venues charge only an $18 flat fee and a reasonable $1.80 service charge.
One of the country's hottest rock bands went before Congress Thursday to explain why it's not playing any concerts this summer.
Yay! Except, not yay. While the ticket behemoth did trim some of its more exorbitant fees, the antitrust probe against it was thrown out, and Pearl Jam's DIY tour collapsed amid logistical difficulties, as also reported by the Los Angeles Times. To this day, the practice of tacking hidden fees onto concert tickets continues largely unchecked. If you listened to a lot of radio in the mid to late 90s, you may have noticed a slight change to your favorite station's playlists. That is, they began to shrink until they seemed to only play the same 20 or so songs over and over again. You may have also heard said station begin referring to something called Clear Channel, which was a media conglomerate that once owned a few dozen stations, because that's all it legally could own. But, as noted by LA Times reporter Jeff Leeds, that all changed in 1996, when the broadcast lobby successfully implored Congress to help the struggling radio industry by removing that cap. Overnight, instead of a hard limit of 40 stations, a huge company could buy as many stations as it wanted, and, also seemingly overnight, Clear Channel bought up roughly all of them. With one conglomerate in control of all those playlists, the effect was noticeable and immediate. If you weren't listening to those same 20 songs on a Clear Channel station, you were probably listening to a slightly more diverse Jack station, owned by Canadian conglomerate SparkNet Communications. And neither were exactly kind to smaller artists or subgenres. Perhaps ironically, the advent of streaming in recent years has put Clear Channel, rebranded as the slightly friendlier sounding iHeartRadio, on the financial ropes, according to Texas Monthly. But you still can't find much diversity on the radio to this day, and that one act of Congress in 1996 is why. It's impossible to describe the impact MTV had from the day it showed up on your local cable carrier, on music, on television, on the radio, and on pretty much everything else. The channel launched on August 1st, 1981, and while it took a bit for it to spread to all of the major markets, Its power to break artists nobody had ever heard of and turn them into overnight sensations soon became undeniable. Later in the decade, MTV helped facilitate the advent of rap, and in the early 90s, it did the same for grunge. But around that same time, a noticeable shift started to happen. Beginning with the reality series The Real World, MTV began to focus more on increasingly weird reality offerings and much less on music, which was, the M part of its name. By the end of the 90s, reality/competition shows like Lip Service and Road Rules, along with straight-up reality series like True Life and Fanatic, had muscled their way into more and more of the network's programming. And by the middle of the next decade, music had all but disappeared from the rotation. Speaking with CNET in 2011, former VJ Adam Curry explained the reason for the change, which should surprise no one: money. At that time, according to Curry, MTV was raking in $4 billion per year. Great for MTV, not so great for musicians and their fans. It might sound odd if you weren't around, but there was a time in the mid-'80s when the government decided to go to war with music, specifically with lyrics that were deemed to be inappropriate.
Today, our own government is trying to tell you what you should and shouldn't pop into your tape deck.
Their organization, the Parents Music Resource Center, or PMRC, is the one responsible for those parental advisory explicit lyrics stickers that are probably featured on all of your old CDs. And the damage it did to freedom of expression continued to have a dramatic effect in the 90s. For one thing, censorship likely played a role in MTV's transformation. According to the National Coalition Against Censorship, between 1984 and 1994, the number of videos the network was forced to edit due to content rose from 1 in 10 to 1 in 3. Which really sounds like a hassle for everyone involved. For another thing, that parental advisory sticker had an immense chilling effect. As outlined in a paper for the University of Miami, Walmart, the nation's largest retailer, refused to carry any release carrying it, a practice that continues to this day. The 90s were generally a pretty sweet decade for music festivals. It's the decade in which Lollapalooza and Vans Warped Tour were born. And in '94, one of the biggest festivals in history, Woodstock, got a pretty successful reboot. To close out the decade and the millennium, a group of intrepid organizers decided to once more capitalize on a name synonymous with peace, love, and all that mushy stuff to stage what was then one of the biggest festivals in history, Woodstock '99. It did not go well. A combination of poor planning, virtually non-existent crowd control, blazing 100-degree heat, and a lack of water and shelter combined to turn the event into a powder keg packed with over 200,000 extremely annoyed people. According to SF Gate, some of the artists themselves assisted in driving the event toward complete chaos. Insane Clown Posse tossed $100 bills into the crowd to predictable effect. Kid Rock demanded that festival goers pelt the stage with overpriced water bottles, and Fred Durst of Limp Bizkit all but openly encouraged a stampede.
When you see it with your own eyes, it's just 10 times more shocking.
When it was all over, the festival made headlines for all the wrong reasons, namely arson, looting, vandalism, and dozens of hospitalized fans. The San Francisco Examiner probably best summed up the festival with the title Woodstock '99. The day the music died. It's no secret that the music business isn't exactly the least shady of industries, and there have always been managers, promoters, and executives more than willing to take advantage of hot artists to their own ends. But some of the more ultra-shady practices, as outlined by producer Steve Albini in his essay The Problem with Music, really came into vogue in the 80s and 90s. Notably, the practice of throwing absurd amounts of money at new signees, only to forcibly recoup all those Benjamins for stuff like studio time and promotional expenses.
And that system exists to support itself. It doesn't exist to support the bands.
This resulted in 90s icons like Toni Braxton and Courtney Love going broke, sometimes filing multiple bankruptcies. And perhaps nobody got shafted harder than TLC. Despite being one of the highest record-selling girl groups in history, TLC endured financial hardships even at the height of their fame, as a result of poor management and whack contracts. As reported by Beat, all 3 members filed for bankruptcy on July 3, 1995, at the exact moment their hit single Waterfalls was screaming toward the top of the Billboard chart. A decade and a half later, in 2011, that same publication was reporting that lead singer Tion T-Boz Watkins was filing for bankruptcy again for the second time that year. It's pretty common knowledge that many of the Disney Channel's stars of the early 90s became the massive pop stars of the late 90s. Think Justin Timberlake, Britney Spears, and Christina Aguilera. Of course, some of these, like Spears for instance, became the cautionary tales of the 2000s, unprepared as they were for the ridiculous level of fame they were thrust into. If there's one individual who exemplified the decade's seeming ultra-willingness to chew up and spit out young stars, it would be Lou Pearlman, the infamous former manager for the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, among others. As outlined by In Touch Weekly, Pearlman's abuses were myriad, such as pocketing the vast majority of the Backstreet Boys' earnings during the height of their fame, to name one example.
Lou Pearlman created the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, and he cashed in big on their fame at their expense.
Former LFO singer Rich Cronin, one of Pearlman's young charges, said, "Honestly, I don't think Lou ever thought we would become stars. I just think he wanted cute guys around him. This was all an excuse." And then lightning crazily struck and an empire was created. It was all dumb luck. Perhaps, but the $300 million Ponzi scheme Pearlman was running during his rise certainly wasn't. He was charged with financial crimes and sentenced to prison in 2008, where he died 8 years later. When it comes to the way music is actually recorded, and therefore the way the final product sounds, few periods were more significant than the 90s, and not in a fantastic way. The rise of digital audio workstations like Pro Tools removed a lot of warmth from the recordings, to the extent that many engineers would simply dub digital tracks back onto tape to add some warmth back in. Part of the issue, though, was the new dominant medium, CDs, which removed a limitation of vinyl that actually ended up making many recordings sound much, much worse. See, if a mix engineer pushed the limits of loudness prior to CDs, it wouldn't work. Played back on a vinyl record, the earth-shaking volume would force the needle right out of the groove. Digital recording enabled engineers to go buck wild with pushing the volume shelf. While this trend was born in the 90s, it arguably reached its peak with Metallica's 2008 album Death Magnetic, which famously sounds like it's being played on a single loudspeaker inside an empty dumpster. This trend likely played a part in vinyl's unlikely resurgence within the last decade or so, because it turns out that when it comes to recorded music, even if your band plays music designed to wake the dead, sheer volume isn't everything. In 1997, research engineer Andy Hildebrand invented an audio plug-in that could correct the pitch of an incoming signal, allowing even the worst singers to sing in tune. He named his invention Auto-Tune, and it would take all of 1 year before someone used the innovation in flagrant violation of its intended purpose. You see, Auto-Tune, used properly, sounds subtle and completely natural. But in 1998, producers Mark Taylor and Brian Rawling discovered that if you dialed each setting down to 0, the result was the complete opposite of that. Sure, it could force a vocal right on pitch, and it also made the vocalist sound like a soulless android. Elated, Taylor and Rawling applied the technique to the lead vocal on Cher's hit single Believe. And that was it, folks. Game over. The aggressively wrong use of Auto-Tune swiftly became a mainstay in popular music, and it has remained so ever since.
These days, popular TV shows go dark on a regular basis, and if you get tired of watching an old-fashioned sitcom, you're only one click away from the gory post-apocalyptic landscapes of The Walking Dead. While your memories of 90s TV might seem quaint and fluffy in comparison, don't be fooled. When the shows you're now so nostalgic about weren't busy wrapping up every episode in a neat little bow, they plunged into all kinds of downers. So who's ready to relive some childhood nightmares? Changing Nature. On the surface, Dinosaurs seems like an average sitcom. It's got a working-class dad named Earl Sinclair, his wife Franny, and their 3 kids. They actually have a lot in common with The Simpsons, except for the part where they're prehistoric reptiles created by the Jim Henson Company. Yeah, Dinosaurs was a weird show, but it managed to stay on the air for 65 episodes and maintained such a fun tone that looking back, you almost forget that the show ended with the entire family's grisly, cold, heartbreaking demise. The series finale, Changing Nature, ends with the start of an ice age. If that wasn't bad enough, it's shown that the worldwide climate catastrophe is Earl's fault, or, well, the fault of the company he works for. The final episode closes with the Sinclair family huddled together during the blizzard.
After all, dinosaurs have been on this earth for 150 million years. And it's not like we're going to just disappear.
It's a depressing ending, but it's an incredibly effective one. And hey, they're dinosaurs. You can't say that you didn't see it coming. Over the Edge. 90s kids love Batman the animated series, but what made the show a classic was its courageous exploration of mature themes like trauma, loss, identity crisis, and more. That all comes together in the show's most intense episode, Over the Edge. which shows a horrific implosion in the relationship between Batman and his eternal ally, Commissioner Gordon. The reason? Gordon's daughter Barbara, better known as Batgirl, is killed by the Scarecrow, and she dies in her father's arms. Gordon blames Batman and swears to destroy everything the Dark Knight stands for. It's thrilling but painful to watch. The Joker's a scary guy, but even his machinations can't compare to the gut-wrenching sight of Jim Gordon blowing up the Batcave or striking deals with criminals to murder Batman. The good news is that it all turns out to be a dream brought on by the Scarecrow, showing viewers Batgirl's worst fears about what her vigilante career could cost. Still, superhero cartoons don't get much darker than this. Steve-O. Nothing turns a wholesome family sitcom into a terrifying creepshow like a good Halloween episode. But Family Matters got so creepy that Freddy Krueger would probably run away crying into his claws.
Tonight's episode of Family Matters is a little scary, so you might want to watch it with somebody brave.
Steve-O is the name of a demonically possessed ventriloquist dummy who just happens to look exactly like Steve Urkel, the show's nerdy star character. Now, as we all know from The Twilight Zone, ventriloquist dummies are already creepy enough as it is. This doll, though, is like something crafted in the bowels of hell. His voice alone would be enough to make countless children hide under the bed.
You just got what you wished for, pal.
After he comes to life, the dummy proceeds to systematically torture, play with, and murder the entire cast of the show. So yes, for one episode, Family Matters literally turned into a slasher movie. Once again, this ends up being a dream sequence, but try telling that to the traumatized young Urkel fan who didn't make it to the end of the episode. Consider me gone. For an alien life form who spent most of his time plotting to eat the family cat, Alf was a pretty lovable dude. It's a shame that the government had a specialized task force dedicated to kidnapping Alf so they could subject him to tortures like freezing, electrical shock, and dissection. These were the horrific circumstances that prompted the Tanner family to take Alf into the fold and protect him as one of their own. Heartwarming stuff, right? Wrong. In the final episode, Alf was finally called up by his fellow aliens and allowed to leave Earth. But unlike E.T., Alf doesn't get to go home. He misses his flight, and the alien task force finally catches up to him, surrounding him with guns. Fade to black. The ending was supposed to be a cliffhanger for the next season, but the show ended there, with viewers forced to imagine the alien they'd come to love being cut open like the gray guy in Alien Autopsy. A follow-up TV movie came out in 1996 that even acknowledged the experiments, but by that point, everyone had moved on. 90s series finales were rough. The Darkness and the Light. Star Trek is a bastion of hope and optimism, and while Deep Space Nine mostly stayed true to that vision, it wasn't afraid to test the boundaries. The series takes place near the planet Bajor, which has only recently been freed from decades of cruel occupation by the militaristic Cardassians. Political and religious allegories abounded, and one of the show's prominent heroes was Major Kira Nerys, a deeply religious former Bajoran freedom fighter. Or was she a terrorist? Deep Space Nine was never afraid to challenge moral assumptions. While the Cardassian occupation itself was unquestionably immoral, the episode The Darkness and the Light went deeper than most TV programs ever would, by also holding up a mirror to Kira's actions as a rebel. In another episode, Defiant, she even refers to herself as a terrorist.
I know I was a terrorist, and if I'd had this ship then...
Overall, the show mostly sides with Kira. Her people were being oppressed, and she had to fight back, even if it meant spilling Cardassian blood. However, DS9's writers pointedly examine the fact that Kira is so unrepentant, particularly when she's interrogated by a Cardassian who claims he did everything he could to spare Bajoran lives. There are no easy answers here, and that's exactly why fans love DS9. Bullets over Bel Air. Few shows epitomize the 90s as much as The Fresh Prince of Bel Air. Everyone who grew up in that decade knows the lyrics to the theme song by heart, and the series introduced the world to Will Smith, the movie star of all movie stars. Even though the show usually stuck to wacky sitcom hijinks, there were a few dramatic moments, like the classic episode about Will's breakdown over being rejected by his father.
How come you don't want me, man?
But things got even darker when Will takes a bullet for Carlton during a mugging gone wrong. Will survives, but he does get hospitalized. Later on, Carlton visits Will at his hospital bed and tells Will that he bought a gun to protect them if it ever happens again. Rather than being impressed, Will is furious and he demands that Carlton leave the gun behind. Carlton stomps off but does as Will asks. The scene ends up with Will choking up as he empties the bullets from the chamber. The whole sequence is as emotional as a TV program can get. While Fresh Prince went back to being funny after that, these darker moments are some of the big ones fans remember today.
While some of the biggest 90s rock bands like Radiohead, Foo Fighters, and Pearl Jam have catapulted themselves into even more spectacular careers in the ensuing years, others have sadly fallen off the radar. So let's check out what some of them are up to. You might remember the Shirley Manson-fronted Garbage for any number of reasons. Their first two albums, Garbage and Version 2.0, won a string of awards and sold millions of copies worldwide. They also contributed the title track to The World Is Not Enough in 1999, and they were one of the architect acts of the post-grunge movement. The third album, Beautiful Garbage, was released in 2001, but it wasn't as successful as its predecessors, thanks mostly to some less than stellar reviews. After the release of their fourth album, Bleed Like Me, the group announced an indefinite hiatus in 2005. They finally reunited in 2011 and have released 2 albums since then. Their next album is expected to arrive in 2019 or 2020, so Garbage might very well be around for a while.
Do you feel slightly more iconic these days?
Yes, I feel very iconic.
The Verve were one of Britain's most successful rock acts during the 90s. Part Britpop, part shoegaze, they won numerous Brit Awards, topped the charts repeatedly, and were nominated for a Grammy in 1999 for Bittersweet Symphony. But things haven't exactly been smooth sailing since then for the Verve. They've split up 3 times in their 19 years on the scene, and since the most recent split in 2009, it's been reported that guitarist Nick McCabe and bassist Simon Jones aren't on speaking terms with frontman Richard Ashcroft. Jones and McCabe have since gone on to form their own band, Black Ships, which has since changed its name to Black Submarine. They're still going while Ashcroft has had decent success in his own solo career. Dave Matthews Band formed in 1991 in Charlottesville, Virginia. By the end of the decade, they had won Grammy Awards, sold out huge venues across America, and sold millions of albums worldwide. In 2003, Dave Matthews himself and lead guitarist Tim Reynolds headed out on an intimate acoustic tour without the rest of the band. Months later, Matthews released his first solo album, which netted him another Grammy. But the band never split, as they continued to tour and release music without incident until 2008, when saxophonist Leroy Moore died after complications from an ATV accident. The band's next album, Big Whiskey and the Gru Grux King, was named in honor of and inspired by Moore. It went platinum and was nominated for 2 Grammys in 2010. In 2018, the band's violinist, Boyd Tinsley, announced his hiatus from the group to focus on his health, but he was subsequently fired when abuse allegations were levied against him. Despite this, DMB is still going strong, having dropped their 9th studio album in 2018. Counting Crows' debut solo album, August and Everything After, was a huge hit when it came out in 1993, as it went on to sell 10 million copies worldwide. The band continued strong through the rest of the decade and survived on the other side, releasing their 4th album, Hard Candy, in 2002. One particular high point since then came in 2004 when Accidentally in Love, their contribution to the Shrek 2 soundtrack, was nominated for an Oscar. In 2009, Counting Crows left their label Geffen Records. The band's members embarked on their own individual projects through the early 2010s, though Counting Crows as a group continued to release live and covers albums up until 2013. In 2014, the band released their 7th studio album, Somewhere Under Wonderland, to largely positive reviews from critics. They were also on the road touring as recently as 2018 and 2019. Sonic Youth is a name synonymous with 90s rock bands. The brand of noisy post-punk places them up there with some of the best acts of the decade. Although they emerged during the 80s, they found true commercial success in the 90s, hitting such highs as a headline set at Lollapalooza, a number of critically acclaimed experimental albums, and a guest spot on The Simpsons. This momentum carried on through much of the 2000s, but they started to have serious tribulations as they entered their 3rd decade. One particular lowlight was receiving a rare 0.0 score from Pitchfork for their 2000 album NYC Ghosts and Flowers. In 2011, the band came to an end when Kim Gordon and Thurston Moore separated after 27 years of marriage. Other members, such as Lee Ranaldo, have moved on to solo projects. Hootie and the Blowfish's 1994 debut album, Cracked Rear View, earned the band a Best New Artist Grammy and has gone on to become one of the best-selling albums of all time. By 2018, it had reached a 21 times platinum certification in the US alone. Their second album, 1996's Fairweather Johnson, however, was nowhere near as successful. Hootie Mania died out hard, as the band was barely around in the late 90s and early 2000s. The group went on hiatus in 2008 so that frontman Darius Rucker could pursue his solo career. He managed to achieve bona fide country music stardom and has largely stood down from his role with the Blowfish. But the band is set to reunite in May 2019 for a 44-city tour alongside Bare Naked Ladies, celebrating the 25th anniversary of Cracked Rear View. And after that, they've got plans for a brand new studio album. So it looks like Hootie will be sticking around for a while after all.
You know, I mean, we've been a band 30
3 years now. And so getting back together was, I don't think we felt like we were ever apart.
We remember the 90s for the coordinated dance moves, body glitter, baggy clothing, and the glamorous lives of pop stars. But the price of fame was steep for those who danced and sang their way to the top of the pop charts. Here's the secret world of the 90s music industry. Lou Pearlman managed two of the biggest boy bands of the 90s, NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys. While he may have had a hand in making them stars, Pearlman was a ruthless extortionist, working the band members to the bone and paying them pennies in the process. According to The Guardian, the members of NSYNC were making only $35 a day at one point. It took 3 years of performing and selling millions of records until they received their share of the profits. While Pearlman offered each member of NSYNC a mere $10,000 each, the pop stars began calling their lawyers. Pearlman tried justifying his actions by claiming that the band's contract stated he was legally entitled to 90% of the members' earnings. He was also accused of sexual assault. In the YouTube documentary, The Boy Band Con, former boy band members under Pearlman discussed the controversial music mogul. NSYNC's Lance Bass said on Sway in the Morning,
"The only thing that I ever felt a little strange about was he was very touchy-feely."
After taking advantage of many music stars for over 20 years, Pearlman eventually served jail time. He was serving his 25-year sentence when he passed away from cardiac arrest in 2016. The Spice Girls are a legendarily successful pop girl band for the ages, with 5 distinct members who each had their own personas. The group's debut single, Wannabe, shot to #1 in 37 countries in 1996, making them instant international superstars. Their first album, Spice, sold 31 million copies. It was later revealed that Melanie Chisholm, or Mel C, better known as Sporty Spice, was bullied. She also suffered from depression and an eating disorder. According to The Telegraph, Chisholm admits she experienced feelings of guilt and imposter syndrome when the group became mega famous. Chisholm later revealed that one of her fellow Spice Girls bullied her throughout the group's tenure together. Though she never revealed which group member it was, she told Attitude, "It's been addressed. They were aware of what they'd done and apologized." But Chisholm is in a better place today. She told The Mirror, "I just kind of feel like I can exhale because I don't need to search anymore. I just need to embrace all these parts of myself. Like everybody, we are so complex, and there are so many sides to us." Fans think the life of a pop star is glamorous if everyone knows your name and you're selling millions of records. But it's never that simple. 90s pop and R&B sensation TLC garnered 4 Grammy Awards, 5 MTV Video Music Awards, and 5 Soul Train Music Awards. The trio had a long resume of chart toppers. Their album, Crazy Sexy Cool, stayed on the Billboard 200 for over 2 years. But according to Beat, the group filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy at peak fame in 1995, declaring debts of $3.5 million. Their recording contract favored their label and manager over the performers. The fine print determined that the group only made 56 cents per album sold, and that was divided by 3. According to TLC, the more successful they became, the deeper into debt they fell. The trio would have to cope with tragedy a mere few years following their peak success, when Lisa Left Eye Lopez was tragically killed in a car accident while on vacation in Honduras.
It's always going to be a sore spot for us because that was our sister.
It's hard to fall in love when you're famous, and it's even harder when you're told to be something you're not. George Michael was about as big a music star as you could get, with 10 hits that reached Billboard's #1 spot. But his status at the top was challenged one night. In 1998, Michael was forced to come out as a gay man after a controversial incident involving the police and a public bathroom in Beverly Hills. George was busted when he tried to pick up an undercover cop at a well-known meeting spot. Michael attempted to control the narrative, claiming entrapment, but he officially came out in an exclusive CNN interview shortly after the arrest.
I have no problem with people knowing that I'm in a relationship with a man right now. I have not been in a relationship with a woman for almost 10 years.
Michael told GQ magazine, "I honestly think it was a desperate attempt to make the trauma in my life about me, because then maybe I could control the outcome. Up to then, the traumas had been out of control and the outcome always bad." George had to defend his career after the incident, but it would never be the same. The struggle sounds trivial now, as music stars today can be out in the open about their sexuality without their career taking a hit. Because of Michael and others like him, authenticity is now thankfully celebrated. Pop diva Mariah Carey, with her trademark high-pitched voice, was at the top of the music chain in the 90s. When Carey became famous, her family started treating her like, quote, an ATM with a wig on. But the real darkness began when she married powerful Sony music mogul Tommy Mottola, who controlled, threatened, and abused the young star. The two had a 20-year age gap, and Carey has since compared the union to being a child bride. Carey told Cosmopolitan, "He was older than me by a lot and had a lot of power, and he wanted me to remain away from most people, like sequestered. She even had to ask permission to leave the house." The couple stayed married for 8 years until Mariah finally left. In his book, Hitmaker, The Man and His Music, Mottola expressed remorse for their romantic partnership. He admitted that the relationship was inappropriate and stated, "I am truly sorry for any discomfort or pain." Whitney Houston is one of the most beloved and well-known pop singers of the 90s, but she was constantly told she wasn't, quote, black enough for the R&B community. She was groomed early on to appeal to a white audience. According to the documentary, Whitney, Can I Be Me?, her image was a conscious effort by producer Clive Davis and Arista Records to bury the New Jersey native's hood upbringing and make her classy. Though her hits played on the R&B airwaves, Houston received significant pushback from the black community at the time. She was booed at the 1989 Soul Train Awards while presenting, and Reverend Al Sharpton even labeled her Whitey Houston. Houston later said in an interview, "You're not black enough for them, you're not R&B enough, you're very pop. The white audience has taken you away from them." Houston struggled with pleasing both audiences her entire career and struggled to fit into the right box. But she paved the way for future black pop stars like Beyoncé and Rihanna, who have both spoken out about double standards when it comes to race in the music industry. Britney Spears was just a teenager when she became a megastar, and from day one, her squeaky clean girl-next-door image was calculated with every move she made. As Badisha wrote in The Guardian, "And what must a princess be? Well, white, and Aryan preferably, but also ever smiling, pure, gracious, grateful, and, above all, well-behaved." Spears was groomed from an early age as a cast member of the Mickey Mouse Club, alongside one-time boyfriend Justin Timberlake. But when she decided to go outside of that persona, she was criticized and hypersexualized, eventually leading her to a major public breakdown. Spears survived the damaging press and ultimately kept performing. In 2018, she took up a residency in Las Vegas in a show called Domination and continues to inspire fans around the globe. To this day, Britney Spears still doesn't quite own her own narrative and is still technically under a conservatorship, managed by her father, which she is now legally challenging. Girl group Destiny's Child shot Beyoncé into the limelight, and she's never left. But before the group sold hit records, there were two members who controversially left. In fact, there was almost never a group to begin with, as Beyoncé threatened to go solo early on. The original foursome broke onto the music scene in 1997 with their hit single, No No No, and swiftly became known for their recurring theme of female empowerment. The ladies were longtime childhood friends and recorded 2 records together, but Latavia Robertson and LaToya Luckett soon began claiming unfair treatment, including unequal pay and favoritism toward Beyoncé. The two ultimately were kicked out of Destiny's Child after asking for new management. In his book, Becoming Beyoncé, author J. Randy Taraborelli writes, Robertson and Luckett had questions about the money they were earning, and they felt they were not getting enough attention, both on record and on stage. After being kicked out without warning, Luckett, only 18, revealed she slept in her car for a time. She told The Independent, "During my journey, I was staying at people's houses. I slept in a car in LA while I was making my first album. Only Beyoncé and Kelly Rowland remained, and a third group member, Michelle Williams, was added in 1999. Jennifer Lopez and Sean Diddy Combs had one of the most high-profile relationships of the decade. According to Yahoo Life, the pair met while Lopez was recording her debut album, On the Six. Diddy was a producer on the album, and they began dating in 1999. Their relationship only lasted 2 years. In 1999, the pair was present when a triple shooting incident occurred outside Times Square's Club New York, where they were enjoying a night out with friends. Lopez and Diddy fled the scene, but were both arrested and charged with criminal possession of a weapon and stolen property, according to a police spokesperson. Lopez only spent 14 hours in jail before she was released. Their lawyers stated the couple were victims of circumstance who had been in a life-threatening situation when they were stopped and questioned. The 90s pop star and The Voice co-host Christina Aguilera began working when she was 7 years old. She later admitted that she, quote, felt guilty when she wasn't working, telling Yahoo Entertainment, "It's been embedded in me since I was little. You're shamed if you don't want to keep up." Like Britney Spears, Aguilera was also part of the Mickey Mouse Club, and her solo career took off with the hit Genie in a Bottle in 1999. She later recounted her time as a child star as being uncomfortable. She said, "You're all pitted against one another. It's a weird space to grow up." Aguilera also witnessed domestic violence as a child. She told Bustle, "My dad was very dominant with my mom, and I always knew I was never going to let a man take advantage of me like that." She even sings about it in her song, I'm Okay.
It takes real strength to leave a situation like that with nothing.
The king of Latin pop, Ricky Martin, has been an out gay man for more than a decade. But he had to conceal his identity early in his career. It ate away at him so much that he had a breakdown in 1999 and had to halt his world tour. The Livin' La Vida Loca singer later reflected on his struggles and leaving the tour. He described his feelings at the time to people, stating, "I need to go home. I need silence. I need to cry. I need to be angry. I need to forgive myself for allowing myself to reach this level, to get to where I'm at." Martin said in an interview with Proud Radio, "My music was being heard all over the world, regardless of the language. I could high-five God, but I wasn't living to the fullest. I was sad. I was depressed." In 2010, Ricky officially came out on his website, and he's now happily married with 4 children. Alanis Morissette became a pop rock sensation with her 3rd studio album, Jagged Little Pill, in 1995. With tracks like You Oughta Know and Right Through You, Alanis has never exactly been shy in expressing her feelings toward the men in her past. Morissette has become an outspoken critic of how the music industry treats women, saying that some are forced to sign non-disclosure agreements to stop from speaking out about their abusers. Having her own negative experiences within the industry as a teenager, Morissette sang about an abusive relationship with a music executive in Hands Clean. She told the Sunday Times, "Almost every woman in the music industry has been assaulted, harassed, raped. It's ubiquitous. More in music even than film. It's just so normalized." Morissette told The Independent that she would have done things differently if she could go back, saying, "I would have had a few extra guardians. There were a lot of people with the title guardian around me that were often, at times, the very people who were not a guardian." Morissette has since had a steady, successful music career, earning a whopping 7 Grammy Awards.
A pop group that disbanded almost immediately after reaching fame? British anarchists that took over a decade to release a hit. Here's what became of the one-hit wonders of the 1990s. Marcy Playground's hit Sex and Candy caught listeners' attention with its mellow sound and peculiar lyrics about disco lemonade, sending the song to #1 on the Billboard Alternative Airplay chart in 1997 and #8 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart in 1998. The song was everywhere, and it looked as though Marcy Playground was poised to be a staple band in the post-grunge scene. They even toured with bands like Fastball, Toad the Wet Sprocket, and Everclear. Alas, their follow-up singles failed to gain steam. Their sudden success also contributed to some burnout. In an interview with News Times, lead singer John Wozniak said, "It just got to the point where it was too overwhelming." That's not to say the band stopped making music altogether, though. They released 4 albums following their debut. Their latest record, Lunch, Recess, and Detention, was released in 2012, and the band is still actively touring. However, Sex and Candy remains their most successful song to date. British alternative rockers The Verve achieved major success in the UK and in the States with 1998's Bittersweet Symphony, a track that reached #12 on the US Billboard Hot 100 chart. The song earned the band a Grammy nomination in 1999, and its music video featuring singer Richard Ashcroft practicing some awful sidewalk etiquette earned several VMA nominations, though Ashcroft later said that he thought the video was almost too popular.
For me as a musician, I put so much work into the track. I was a bit concerned that the visual was almost outweighing the song.
Regardless, the band's big hit had come, and it seemed as though more hits were on the horizon. Alas, none of their follow-up releases would surpass Bittersweet Symphony in popularity. So what happened to the Verve? Well, according to MTV, they broke up in 1999, got back together briefly in 2007, then broke up for good in 2009. Reportedly, their working relationship was tumultuous, and getting sued didn't help matters. According to the BBC, the song was the subject of a complicated copyright lawsuit brought on by former Rolling Stones manager Alan Klein, which resulted in the band losing their royalties and publishing rights to the tune. Those royalties were eventually returned to Ashcroft in 2019. However, if your 90s heart is dying for a Verve reunion, don't hold your breath. According to NME, some band members don't even talk to one another anymore. If you went through a breakup in the late 90s, there's a good chance you had Natalie Imbruglia's cover of Torn playing on repeat in your Walkman. The Australian actress turned singer achieved global recognition at the tender age of 22 after the angsty pop tune took the top spot on Billboard's adult pop airplay chart in 1998 for 14 weeks. Eventually, however, the run slowed and the Torn era came to an end. According to the Irish Times, Imbruglia was feeling the pressure to deliver a dynamite follow-up. She released several albums throughout the 2000s and into the 2010s, but none of her tracks reached the same level of success as Torn did. What's more, she experienced a nearly career-ending hurdle in the years following Torn. According to ABC News Breakfast, Imbruglia had a serious case of writer's block that lasted years. She took time away from music, became a mother, and came back to music with her sixth studio album Firebird, released in 2021. Chumbawamba struck gold with their 1997 song Tub Thumping, giving life to the classic lyrics. I get knocked down, but I get up again. You're never gonna keep me down. The track reached number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 and catapulted to number 1 on the pop songs chart, where it made itself comfy for 9 weeks. With that kind of traction, it felt as though the band, which had been together since 1982, had finally made it big. However, the endearing Tub Thumping would end up being the band's biggest hit, cementing the group's status as one of the most fun one-hit wonders of the 90s. So what happened to Chumbawamba post-Tub Thumping? They made more music and used their tunes to highlight political and social issues over the years, but as the saying goes, all good things must come to an end. According to Rolling Stone, Chumbawamba broke up in 2012. There's no bad blood between bandmates, though, and former lead singer Dunstan Bruce made a documentary about Chumbawamba, which has yet to be widely released.
Not bad for a group of self-proclaimed anarchists from the UK.
90s kids surely remember the grip You Get What You Give had on their stereo systems. Alt-pop rockers New Radicals released the mega hit in 1998, when it made itself home on charts across the globe. You can't help but smile while listening to frontman Greg Alexander sing about not giving up. New Radicals were poised for a breakout career following the success of You Get What You Give, but that all changed in July 1999. According to The Hollywood Reporter, that's when Alexander broke up New Radicals. The reason? He was feeling disenchanted by the concept of celebrity and corporate success. And just like that, New Radicals' bright 90s light was blown out. However, that light was relit in January 2021 when the band reunited after 22 years to play You Get What You Give to celebrate President Joe Biden's inauguration. The song has a special meaning for the president, as it was one he and his family would rally around while his late son, Beau, fought his battle with brain cancer. According to Rolling Stone, Alexander said performing the song was a, quote, huge honor.
So when we heard that You Get What You Give was a Biden family anthem, it felt more radical in a good way than, well, being a Rolling Stone.
As soon as you hear the intro to House of Pain's Jump Around, you know you're in for a good time. The 1992 party hit skyrocketed to the number 3 spot on US charts and charted across the globe. The infectious hip-hop crossover hit had people flocking to the dance floor to, you guessed it, jump around and let loose. House of Pain consisted of Everlast, Danny Boy, and DJ Lethal. They collaborated to create this epic summer hit, but it turned out to be the only huge hit House of Pain would have. The group's follow-up singles failed to chart as highly as Jump Around did, and their 1994 and 1996 albums didn't make waves. And according to Everlast, the group was plagued with personal issues that led to an unhappy atmosphere. He left the group in 1996 and went on to have a successful solo career, while DJ Lethal joined Limp Bizkit, and according to Page 6, Danny Boy battled drug addiction until he got clean in 2005. House of Pain have reunited on and off to play shows over the years, and all 3 members were part of the hip-hop supergroup La Coca Nostra, which Danny Boy and DJ Lethal still perform with. Canadian crooner Tall Bachman took over the airwaves with 1999's She's So High, a catchy pop number that anyone who's thought their significant other is out of their league can relate to. The song reached number 1 on Billboard's adult pop airplay chart in September 1999, and it peaked at number 14 on the Hot 100 chart that same year. Apart from its performance on the charts, the single's music video, featuring a flying girl diving from the rooftops, also helped solidify the song's icon status. Bachman's Ode to Admiration made a powerful impression on late 90s pop, but his other works weren't as commercially successful. He released a second album in 2004, but he's mostly laid low in the years since his 90s hit was released. Oddly enough, She's So High was back in mainstream consciousness in 2019, after it was featured in a Peloton holiday ad that divided the internet. Variety reports that while that ad was going viral, Bachman was in talks with Netflix about creating a show. However, there's no word on the potential program's fate. Alternative rock group Semisonic unleashed a huge 90s hit with 1998's Closing Time, which hit #1 on the Billboard Alternative Airplay chart in the US and reigned there for 5 weeks. The song, both a catchy way to get patrons to finish their last drink and a metaphor for entering the world, put Semisonic on the late 90s pop rock map. Despite their massive success, it wouldn't be long before Semisonic seemed to disappear off the face of the planet. What happened? Well, according to Entertainment Weekly reports, the band didn't break up necessarily. They just stopped playing music in the early 2000s. One of the reasons is that lead singer Dan Wilson wanted more time to care for his daughter. He hasn't been completely out of the music scene, though. According to Rolling Stone, he'd found success writing songs alongside musical powerhouses like the Chicks, Taylor Swift, and Adele. After laying mostly dormant for almost 20 years, Semisonic got the band back together and released a new EP in 2020, bringing that nostalgic 90s pop rock sound to the 21st century. The band is still playing together, and according to their websites, they're planning to play some live shows in 2023. 1998's pop folk rock tune Kiss Me by Sixpence None the Richer was the song to slow dance to at any late 90s high school dance. The dreamy romantic anthem wasn't solely a hit with love-stricken teens, though. In fact, Billboard named it one of the best songs of 1999, with the single reaching #2 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. The track also earned a Grammy nomination in 2000. With such a widespread hit under their belts, Sixpence None the Richer seemed poised to dominate the charts with other sweeter-than-pie pop tunes. Their covers of There She Goes and Don't Dream It's Over made some splashes, but they didn't match the tsunami of success that came with Kiss Me. The band released an album in 2002, but disbanded just 2 years later. After a 3-year hiatus, the band reunited and released new albums in 2008 and 2012, but they haven't released new music since. Need a little bit of Monica in your life or a little bit of Erica by your side? If so, turn on Lou Bega's version of Mambo No. 5. The German singer graced us with this hit in 1999, and it delivered, reaching #3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in November of that year, after an impressive run on global airwaves over the summer. It's one of the most iconic songs of the 90s, filled with jazz and mambo riffs that make people flock to the dance floor. The song's global success seemed like the perfect career tee-up for Bega. As it turns out, though, it had the opposite effect. To this day, Mambo No. 5 is still Bega's only chart-topping song. That's not to say that Bega didn't try to replicate the success of the song. He released albums in 2001, 2006, and 2010, but none of their tunes ignited that same spark that Mambo No. 5 did in '99. The albums may not have been massive commercial successes, but that didn't stop Bega from touring and performing his beloved 90s song in front of audiences. Now, you may wonder, how does Bega really feel about his one-hit wonder status? According to Vanity Fair, he had mixed feelings for a long time. But at the end of the day, he's all for Mambo No. 5, and he's grateful for everything it's brought him.
I'd be happy for you to get up there and just play that song for 40 minutes.
Yeah, it's an icebreaker. It's an absolute icebreaker. I'm happy.
Alternative listeners got a whimsical breath of fresh air in 1992 with Blind Melon's No Rain, an indie folk track that put the band on the map in several ways. For starters, it was accompanied by a music video that introduced the world to the B-Girl, a sweet kid who became a slight pop culture obsession. And then there was its global commercial success, with the song reaching the #1 spot on several rock charts. The group was already touring, but the success of No Rain and their debut album led to more road time in the production of their sophomore album 1995's Soup. Touring, while great for Blind Melon's promotion, had its downsides. According to Ultimate Classic Rock, singer Shannon Hoon struggled with drug addiction during the band's intense touring schedule and sudden catapult into the mainstream. He tried to get sober several times, but unfortunately those stints didn't stick. Despite Hoon's addiction issues, Blind Melon kept touring to promote Soup. Sadly, during a tour in October 1995, 28-year-old Hoon died on the band's tour bus after overdosing on cocaine. According to the band's website, surviving members of Blind Melon spent years trying to find a new lead singer before breaking up in 1999. Despite their struggle, the group eventually found a new vocalist and reunited in 2006. They released an album in 2008 and put out several songs in 2021. Who knows, maybe there's still another hit somewhere in Blind Melon's future. If you or anyone you know needs help with addiction issues, help is available. Visit the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration website or contact SAMHSA's National Helpline at 1-800-662-HELP 4357.